If you are building your family with fertility treatment, donor conception, surrogacy, or even adoption, you may wonder what makes a real family? Well, in this episode, we're going to help you answer that question. You will meet Pedro Andrade. He is a filmmaker and a journalist who created a new docuseries called Somewhat Familiar. And in his docuseries, he interviews all sorts of people all over the globe talking about the ways that they built their families and how they find joy, how they find meaning, and how they find a way to exist in a world that sometimes doesn't work for them. He will also be talking about his own personal journey to be a dad with his husband. So tune in. I think you're going to love this episode. From our Building Your Family community, this is the Building Your Family podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Schumann, author, researcher, and reproductive medicine therapist. Welcome back to a new episode of the Building Your Family podcast. I'm so delighted to have you here to meet somebody special. His name is Pedro Andrade. He is a filmmaker and a journalist and such a talented man in so many ways. He's here to talk to you not just about his journey, but about the journeys of others that he captured so beautifully in his series that is now on HBO Max. So welcome, Pedro. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to come to your podcast to talk a little bit about my project.
Well, I would love to talk about your project, and I want everyone out there to tune in. But first, could we start with your own personal project, your family building journey, and how you started thinking about this kind of in a broader way?
The truth is, I've always known I was going to be a dad. I usually say that parenthood for me was as certain as death. That's something that I knew was going to be in my life, regardless of how I was going to achieve it. I didn't know exactly with who, when, where, but it's something that I never questioned. Even though I'm a male and we don't have biological clocks, when I reached my 40s, I was like, there are things that I want to experience when it comes to parenthood that if I keep waiting much longer, chances are I won't be able to experience. And so I started really searching for how I was going to achieve that dream, achieve that goal. My husband and I have been together for about 18 years. Even on our first date, we talked about parenthood. It wasn't a make it or break it type of thing. It wasn't a weird conversation of like, let me see if this is the right person or not based on his views on parenthood. But it's something that we always felt like was very aligned, very cohesive. I have been a journalist for many years, and journalists, at least the field that I navigate, I have the privilege of sort of feeding my curiosity whenever I conveniently want to learn about something. So I'll just give you an example. I hosted a show for CNN Latin America for 6 years, and it was a show about communities. And anytime I had a curiosity about a community, I pitched a story on it. So I did a story on the incarcerated community. I did a story about psychedelics users. I did a story on sex workers. And when I knew I wanted to be a dad, I also did a story on surrogacy. And I was shocked by how much misinformation was out there. I was shocked by how little I knew about the world of surrogacy. And after I finished that episode, I came home and I told Ben, I think I know how we're going to start our family. And it wasn't just that. We thought extensively about adopting a kid, either in America or in Brazil. But I think there is this misconception about adoption that, you can just go to an orphanage and purchase a child and come home. It's very complicated. It's very nuanced. Sometimes it takes a really long time.
Yes.
And I think it's a spectacular opportunity for the parents and for the child. We still think about adopting. We're still we have signed up, but we're waiting for an answer. But at that time, when I was 43, I was like, I don't have the luxury of just sitting and waiting. I have a friend that took 7 years. I have another that took 5.5 years. I was like, I want to have a little bit more control of this journey. And thankfully, we ended up meeting the most wonderful surrogate in the planet, someone who I'm deeply, deeply
Mm,
grateful for the rest of my life. I'm in debt with her. And now Isabel is a year and a half, and I'm the
sweet.
happiest father on earth. It was
Wow.
interesting having cameras around me throughout this emotional roller coaster, but I'm really proud of the project, and I'm proud that I was vulnerable enough to like share the wonders and the challenges of this process with everyone.
And it's so important because people, as you said, are really, really confused by the whole idea of surrogacy,
Hmm.
particularly in places where it's not legal or it's in religious communities where it's frowned upon. And there's so much misinformation, even on social media. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, really quick. I'll never forget. I know this amazing, amazing journalist called Mariana Van Zeller. She was born in Portugal. She hosts an incredible show called Trafficked on Nat Geo, and she went on Joe Rogan, and somehow surrogacy. I think she did an episode about surrogacy in Nigeria. And I understand the taboo and why people have a bad image, or I understand why some people view surrogacy under a negative light, but we'll get to that at another point. But she was giving an interview to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has about 50 million listeners or viewers. And I'll never forget, he said, "Oh, I know a few cases of gay couples that they paid for the surrogate, and the next day the surrogate changed their mind and kept the baby, and they lost the money and they lost the baby." And it's so reckless and it's so irresponsible to share this kind of information because it's not true. A lot of people don't know that we're talking about two women when you talk about surrogacy, an egg donor and then a surrogate. The surrogate doesn't have any biological connection with that child, even though I love Whitney, our surrogate, so much that I hope and I believe that there's a part of Isabel that comes from her generosity and her love for Isabel. But I'm talking about genetically speaking. Most people don't know that a surrogate's carrying a baby that's not her baby genetically. And I also understand, not in this case, but if you look back, historically speaking, I'm well aware that back in the day there were baby farms and women that were lived in marginalized communities and they were desperate for money. They couldn't put food on the table, so they had to sell their wombs. But because of that atrocity, 97% of the countries around the world don't allow surrogacy. When it comes to America, though, everything is very, very, very scrutinized. Everything is very, very contractual. You have a lawyer for the surrogate, you have a lawyer for the intended parents. To my surprise, less than 3% of the women that decide to become surrogates are approved. They go through an excruciating 5 interviews to test their psychological ability. They have to be employed, they have to be financially independent, they
Hmm.
have to have had 2 healthy gestations. They prefer women that are married. Anyway, so I think we live in a society in which generosity is something that comes attached with, why then do that? Why then should a woman go ahead and do that? And these questions are questions that are answered on the show. I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, but for example, Whitney was adopted, and I said, "You have a structured life, you have a beautiful family. Why would you want to do this?" And she said, "If it wasn't for someone else's generosity, my life wouldn't have turned out the way it did. So I wanted to pay forward." And there's so much beauty and so much poetry and so much altruism in that, you know, in that gesture, in that behavior, in that uh, choice that I feel like Ben and I really have won the lottery, like finding Whitney.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah. And we talk about here on this podcast how, the psychological profile of a
Hmm.
surrogate is very different than what people expect. Their psychological profile is usually someone who's very altruistic by nature. They're very loving and giving. And they often say the best part of the whole thing was seeing the faces of the intended parents when the baby was
Hmm.
delivered. And unfortunately, a lot of either very religious or conservative groups do not imagine or can't imagine how that could be possible, but it is. It's very true, and they love it, and they feel so good about what they've done, and that's great that you had such a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's something also that I've come to believe throughout this process and before the beginning of this process, interviewing so many surrogates. I genuinely believe that there is a sense of empowerment
Mhm.
when you know that that family, that entire love story, that entire legacy only exists because of you. And I don't underestimate the physical cost that comes with, getting pregnant. So the hormonal consequences of a gestation. So I have the utmost respect. And when it comes to Whitney, like I said, I have a level of gratitude that I know I sound dramatic, but I would take a bullet for her in a heartbeat
Mm,
because
mhm.
my life is one with her and my life would have been completely different without her. And I don't take that for granted.
So nice. And what about your egg donor? How did you decide on an egg donor with you and your husband choose someone?
That's a great question. And it's a question that, to my surprise, is very rarely asked. Finding an egg donor it's an interesting process because some people say, oh, you're playing God in a way, which is subjective because if you put a stent in your heart, you're playing God in a way. If you're operating
Exactly.
cataracts, you're playing God.
You take a flu shot. Wear glasses.
Yes, exactly. I remember in the beginning, we caught ourselves being somewhat attached to the physical aspect, but very like shortly after we started prioritizing their health profiles. So not in my close family, but in a distant, but still my blood family. I've witnessed mental health issues, just for lack of a better example. And I know how complicated that can be, and I know how unfortunate it is. And I'm not vilifying anyone that goes through that. But I remember we found an egg donor that we liked, but she mentioned some severe mental health issues within her family. And that was a bit of a deal breaker for us, which I lost quite a few nights wondering if I was being unfair. Even though I'm not a very religious person, I think I'm somewhat spiritual and I believe that things don't happen for a reason. Even though I'm a big fan of science, don't get me wrong, but I was like, maybe this is what's meant to be, blah, blah, blah. It turned out that we went ahead with the genetic testing and there was an incompatibility genetically between us and her. And so we had to move on to another one. And we really liked another one, but she left us waiting for 4 months and then changed her mind. Then we found another one and she said she would have accepted twins. But then when we were going to do the embryo transfer before she traveled, she said no, because we implanted two embryos even
Mhm.
though one stuck. So that was like right off the bat. We said that we wanted to try twins. The universe was smarter than us and allowed us not to have twins. And now, in hindsight, I see how difficult it could have been. But
Mhm.
anyway, and then we finally found this egg donor that to me, she had an amazing family history when it comes to health. She looked like an ex-girlfriend I had when I was in high school. She reminded me of her. So it felt like Ben and I, we felt like it could be someone that in the real world we could like as a girlfriend, as a friend, whatever. And I saw a video. A lot of people don't know this. When you find a donor, whether it's male or female, it's almost like online dating. I've
Mhm.
been with Ben for so long that I was never on a dating app. It's something that I quite often say that it's a curiosity that unlike many others, I'll never understand or fulfill because now hopefully I'll stay
Mhm.
with Ben forever. But I imagine that it's similar because you look at their photo and then you see their hobbies and then their family history and their academic history. But to me, I was looking for someone that felt light, use your quotation marks, but felt light, satisfied, happy, someone that seemed content with life. And after you you flag a couple of people that you seem interested, or a couple of profiles that you seem interested. Then they send you a video of the potential egg donor, and it's not a video designed for you. It's a video that they record, pre-record, and she just sounded really sweet and not anxious and not trying to be, someone that would probably be what our expectations are. You know how, like, when you watch Miss Universe and it's like, I like poetry and I like walk
Mm-hmm.
sunsets on the beach and I like,
Yes.
and there are these
Mm-hmm.
like sort of like pre-made, pre-structured answers. And she just felt really authentic, and the reasoning behind her doing this felt real. And I don't know, I may be poeticizing this a little bit much, but I kind of knew it was her, like, then and there. I was like, this
Mm-hmm.
feels right. But I'm sure you, more than anyone, because you've been hosting this amazing podcast for a while and you've listened to so many women's experiences when it comes to IVF. And it is an emotional roller coaster. I mean, it can be a excruciating experience. And so, like, waiting to see how many eggs were retrieved, how many eggs were viable, how
Mm-hmm.
many embryos were made from Ben's sperm, how many had been made from my sperms, how many are AA, how many are D.
Stressful.
See, that was maybe the hardest part of it all. That anxiety, that
Mm-hmm.
call that you're waiting. And you go on social media and you see women that go through this for years. They go through 5, 6, 7 cycles. And I'm
Yes.
like, wow, like I'm in awe of their determination.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
And with your surrogate, I mean, with your donor rather, did you have an arrangement where you'll be able to reach out to her at some point, or your daughter will be able to reach out to her?
No, as of right now, no. I know that contractually she didn't want that,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked for us as well. I did send her a letter mentioning how unimaginably grateful I was and how that felt right. And she doesn't know who I am and I don't know who she is, but through the agency. But there is a world in which there is a way that I can reach out to her through the agency in
Mm-hmm.
case, for whatever reason, a doctor, there's a medical situation in which we might need an exam or blood work or something. And she seemed very accommodating when it comes to that. But
That's
I
great.
hope that's not the case.
Mm-hmm. But it does feel good to have that safety net.
Yeah. And nowadays, I mean, you don't know when kids are going to be deeply allergic to something that's, might complicate medical procedures in the future and things like that.
And health does change over time, right? No one, or very few people in their 20s or even early 30s get serious cancer or
Hmm.
serious diabetes. It's usually developed over time when you're older. So that's great to be able to get that information.
Yeah. It's peculiar, unique, different to love someone you don't know, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I guess that's what I feel.
Uh-huh. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Imagine your beautiful future. You're snuggling with your child. You feel so connected to them. Your friends and family are so happy, and you have everything that you've ever wanted. I want this for you too, but I want more than that. I want you to feel secure knowing that you've made the best decisions, not just short term, but long term for your future family. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you're choosing a donor, choosing a clinic, learning how to talk to your donor conceived child about their origins, all of these decisions will have wider implications for your future. And I want you to have the right resources so you can feel empowered and confident at this very important time in your life. That's why I'm so excited to introduce you to Building Your Family. It's the only expert-guided platform designed for parents and parents-to-be using reproductive medicine. We provide unique strategies that you won't find anywhere else to make your path to parenthood smoother and more informed. And that's why our approach is about offering practical and actionable steps that you can use right now. Whether you're just starting out or already deep into your process, Building Your Family is here to guide you with expert advice, specialized education, stress reduction strategies, and a community to support you every step of the way. We can't wait to see you inside. So tell me now about your series and how you decided to do this and choose, because you chose particular countries to go to see how they different sorts of families created their lives and positioned themselves in a way that made them feel the most comfortable they could in their circumstance. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What made you decide these places, and what are some of the things that you learned along the way?
Absolutely. Just to contextualize, the show's about different family structures around the world. When I decided to become a dad, I knew I wanted I was determined to be the best dad that I could be.
Hmm.
And humbly, in order to achieve that goal, I wanted to learn from all sorts of parents. And I remember vividly when I pitched that show to HBO Max, they bought the idea right away. But for me, it was a process to come to terms with the fact that I was about to really open my privacy, my intimacy, my life in a way that I never had before. The reason why I did it, I mean, there are a couple of reasons. I mean, I've been held hostage. I've interviewed
Wow.
terrorists. I've infiltrated cartels. I host the most viewed travel show in Latin America, and that took me to over 90 countries. But I had never been this, once again, vulnerable. I expected honesty and transparency from the protagonists that I chose for these episodes. But I realized that I wasn't being as transparent with my audience as they were. I wasn't in the closet. It wasn't something that I hid in any way, shape, or form. But it felt in a way liberating to just have absolutely nothing to hide, nothing they really didn't know. And so when I spoke to Ben, he was like, "Are you sure about this?" I genuinely felt like after covering geopolitics for so long, I realized that our world is divided into these two groups. One group that believes that the conservative family is the solution to all of our problems. And then another group that believes in a plethora of other possibilities. And so I'm careful with this word, with this verb, because I think it's overused, but I wanted to normalize, different choices, try to
Yes.
break through all the noise and the super partisan, aggressive dialogue. And I just wanted people to see that the essence of a family is kind of the same, no matter how that family unfolds, comes
Yes.
to be, and I usually say also that we're all doing our best. We're all trying our best. And I think I learned this among so many other things from Whitney, our surrogate. She said, "I genuinely believe anyone who wants to be a parent should be able to be a parent." And I thought that was so beautiful. I decided the locations, the places, and the families based on how could I have different perspectives when it comes to the same orbit. I'll give you a
Mm-hmm.
random example. I think for a long time, there have been a lot of successful shows about a number of different subjects that revolved around food. So food
Yes.
is sort of like the bait. It catches your attention and then it takes you elsewhere, and I
Mm-hmm.
think this show has a lot of that. I don't think it's a show that's repetitive or redundant. Each family teaches me something entirely new, but I think it also will surprise people, about things that they had no idea. So I went to South Korea to talk about adoption. I'll make it short because it's a convoluted story, but throughout last century, millions of children were exported and basically sold from South Korea. South Korea is a very small country. No other nation has adopted kids abroad as much as South Korea.
Really?
Second place, I think, is China. and it
Okay.
actually became a business. So what happened was that revolved around so many lies and false stories that now you have a humongous movement of Korean born children that were adopted elsewhere. And now they're coming back to understand their roots, to see if their parents are still alive. And we were lucky enough to find this guy who was adopted by this amazing family in California. He's 44 years old and he went back to South Korea on a tour, and he somehow ended up in his orphanage, his former orphanage. And they're like,
Wow.
your birth mom has been here 3 times looking for you. He found the birth mom, discovered that she was battling cancer, moved to South Korea, found his wife, has a daughter that is now the age that he was when he was adopted. And we got to see all pieces of the puzzle. I
Wow.
interviewed his adopted mom, his biological mom, him, his wife. So it's such a nuanced reality, and to sort of like try to understand all of these aspects of the story was fascinating. We went to China. I won't spoil this part of the show as well, but we thought we were going to be boy dads, and we ended up being a girl dad. So I wanted to understand like what life is like. Like I went to the only matriarchal society in the planet. So it's
Hmm.
the only place known to us that still exists that where females call the shots. So what would our world look like if females didn't have to work 10 times harder to be where they're at?
Yeah.
I found an incredible foster family, which also requires an unimaginable amount of altruism and generosity, because basically you're adopting that child temporarily. At some point, in the best case scenario, you give back that child as a teenager or something. And so you're left with nothing but that experience, that finite. Single mothers by choice. And one of my favorite episodes is the episode about older parents. When I was born, my grandfather was my age when I had Isabel. So it's almost like I
Hmm.
skipped a generation.
Hmm.
And what do I gain with that? The wisdom and the maturity that I gain with that. And what have I lost with that? Time will tell what I won't witness and what I won't see.
Hmm.
But I'm really proud of the project, and I'm really grateful to the people that, I mean, the show really takes you on a journey, an emotional journey. Like it's really beautiful, and I'm so grateful for how vulnerable everybody was willing to be. You know.
That's wonderful. In my practice, and also on my community platform, we have places for everyone. And there's so many people, I think, who feel like even if they feel more empowered than they used to, because of course, being able to see these families for 30 years, things have changed, right? I started before the gay baby boom in America, and now life has changed so much and for the better in some ways. But now we're also turning a corner
Hmm.
where things might go south for a lot of families. And in my practice and also my platform, I see people trying to move their embryos to New York. The reproductive attorneys are telling parents, well, you never got married and you're a gay couple. So now you should do the second parent adoption because we really have to find as many ways as possible that you can protect yourself. There's so many concerns. And I do fear that it's going to drive more and more people kind of into hiding. It's going to
Hmm.
put more and more people in the position where they feel afraid to start their families. And, I kind of saw it grow. We saw such a huge jump between, I think it was 2015 to 2021. There was like 146% jump in surrogacy transfers.
Hmm.
And that's because, the federalization of gay marriage in 2015 started to really amp up the ability for people to feel like, okay, I can do this. Maybe
Hmm.
I was, insecure before, or maybe there was some internalized homophobia, or maybe I felt like as a single parent, I couldn't do it. And now I feel more empowered. And I think there's a lot of people who are now getting more nervous again.
Without a doubt.
And that's your experience as well.
It's interesting that you say this. The first episode of the series is actually in Italy. And it's ironic that you mentioned this because I wanted to showcase the yin and yang of the moment we're going through in our society right now. What does that mean? Here we are in one of the very few countries that embrace surrogacy for now. And I went to Italy. That was a country that also embraced surrogacy for a short period of time. And now they have elected the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who is one of the biggest, most relevant faces of the far right movement. They also have the Vatican there. And so, since she came to power, if Ben, my husband, and I were to hire Whitney, our surrogate, I don't like the verb hire, but you get what I mean, and have
Hmm.
Isabel living in Italy, we could potentially face 5 years in jail, pay 2
Oh
million
my
euros
God.
of fine. So I interviewed a couple that, just like Ben and I, decided to go this route. And now their daughter is treated as a refugee. They're not,
Oh
she's
my
not their
gosh.
legal child. She has no benefits. She's not viewed as an Italian citizen, even though she was born in America, but her parents are in Italy. She was 6 days old when she was in Italy. So I wanted that episode to be a bit of a wake up call for people that underestimate how dangerous it can be to have your rights that you take for granted. Every day
Yes.
you have your coffee and have your breakfast, and you're saying, you
Hmm.
read things in the news and you're like, huh, it's all good. This won't happen to me.
Right.
It does happen. It can happen. I'm happy to say that they actually ended up having a second child, but they're now desperate to move elsewhere. They're like, we can't live in Italy anymore because even preschool, even like education, like our kids are not viewed by the government as Italians or as worthy of their respect or their opportunities. And I'm going to sound very dramatic here, but one of the most popular shows on TV for a while was *Handmaid's Tale*, Margaret Atwood's,
Yes.
phenomenal script and book. And what I find so incredible is that you start on the first season and you think we're talking about the 19th century, and all of a sudden you see that
It's too
it's
familiar.
today, it's current, it's nowadays, and just like we just walked backwards. It's sort of like that
Yes.
pendulum. We move forward, but unavoidably we move backwards. So yeah, it's something that I think about often, and even nowadays, like Ben and I, we've talked about potentially moving to Florida, for example, where I'm at, and I don't say this trying to be partisan, political, but once you have a child, you're not your own priority anymore, ever again.
Correct. Correct.
And so, like, when I
Hmm.
think about moving elsewhere, outside of New York, I'm like, yeah, no, I'll be fine. I've lived in many places. I was born and raised in Rio. I've been to very homophobic nations and interviewed gay activists in Russia, for example.
Wow.
I can handle it. However, I don't want my daughter to have to deal with this kind of
Right.
judgment, this kind of opinion. And so, like, nowadays, I'm like, yeah, New York has its obstacles and its challenges. I mean, fiscally, it's outrageous how much more we pay in New York. But I'm like, well, here at least I feel safe. We're just
Yes.
another gay couple that had a baby through surrogacy.
Right.
And I think that's a
Exactly.
blessing.
So do you think that because we have this issue where in some ways things are kind of going backwards, but at the same time, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? You can't say we're going to go back to the 1950s where everybody has to go into the closet. That's not happening. Thank God. And so, I mean, I think certainly for the trans community, unfortunately, it's a
Hmm.
different story because they have less power and certainly
Yeah,
more abuse, right?
I agree.
But how do you think the the world that we live in is going to kind of manage this? Because, for example, I was at the Men Having Babies conference, and one of the directors said, "Could you run a group for single men?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to do it." And I go into the other room, and he said, "There's not going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be very small. You'll be done in an hour." It was wall to wall people. And so it doesn't look like, fortunately, although people are more afraid and more hesitant, that this desire is going to stop, obviously, and at the same time, there's going to be more conflict. So, what do you think is going to happen? Where are people going to move to? How are they going to live their lives? How are they going to have their families?
That's a great question. It's a big question as well because, I mean, one, I agree that you can't put the genie back in the bottle, and I agree that we're not going backwards centuries ago. But look at what happened to abortion, for example. I think no one expected that to happen, and overnight, that's one of those
Yes.
situations in which they're like, "Oh, they're just talking. It'll never pass. It'll never go through." And then you saw Clarence Thomas and other people saying, trying to strip gay rights from from my community.
Mhm.
I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit controversial, but I think we live in a day and age in which money really makes the world go round. And it's ironic that in my lifetime, when I was a child, your gender determined if you could have a family or not, start a family or not. Nowadays, the surrogacy process, it's a costly, it's expensive, it demands patience, it demands networking and
Mhm.
access and
Yes.
other things. But so what determines if you can start a family or not is if you can afford, in a way, something like this. I'm far from, viewing myself as someone who's super wealthy, and like these choices, they have a massive impact in my day-to-day life. I'm going round and round to say that I think when it comes to the gay community, I think we are just too influential to be ignored at this point, to be, done wrong at this point. You ask, where would people move to? I also do believe that if you study history from like the Silk Road, you see that the Ottoman Empire dominated the world for, a long time. And then it was the Roman Empire. And now it's the American Empire. And even though I am a proud American, I'm an American citizen today, and I love living here. I have no intention of living anywhere else. I do see cracks in this megalomaniac dream that we breathe every day. Like the American dream doesn't feel as solid as it was for so long. So I think the world is also a lot more globalized. I think you can live a very comfortable life with access to the same sort of sources of information and interesting and interested people elsewhere. I have lots of friends that moved to Portugal, for example, from America, and
Yes.
they're living incredible lives. I have friends
Beautiful.
that moved to Mexico, and they live very comfortable lives. I have friends that went back to Brazil. It's not something that I would want as of right now. But like I said, Isabel is my priority. I told Ben when we started a family, I said, are you ready to potentially downgrade our lives? What does that mean? What I meant by that was, if everything goes right and we're both employed and we're doing okay, perfect. Our life is here. This is great. Now, if things changed, if our rug for some reason is pulled off our feet, then we might have to go elsewhere. And whatever is good for Isabel must be good for us. And so I don't cancel that possibility.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's so important. So many people ask me, where should I live? And it does make a difference. And it does
Hmm.
make a difference for, the research shows us that that's one of the most important things in a child's life is where they grow up, because it's going to determine their social circles and their culture and their environment and all their influences apart from their parents. So it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's also interesting because people don't want to give anything up. They want to. I don't want to say they want to have it easy, but they want to have a comfortable life. They want to have
Hmm.
health care. They want to have things that should be the basic, and slowly they're starting not to be. So I think that also impacts, like when you think about. I think healthcare is a very complex subject, but it's true. Like when you look at healthcare in America, it's very complicated. And having children in America it's harder than it used to be in that sense. This is the first time in 3 generations in which a 30-year-old man today almost for certainly makes less than his father made at that age, his grandfather made at that age, and his great grandfather made at that age. And so like it's the income inequality that we see, like Elon Musk is worth $650 billion.
Mhm.
And I don't want to like sound like an angry activist because I'm not, and I'm not one of those people that believes that billionaires just should not exist. I'm not. That's not the type of statement that I'm sharing with you. But I think we've lost touch with certain boundaries and like the reality, that we live in.
Yeah, and, humanity in a way, being able to see everyone being entitled to live the life that they want to live and not having these, horrible restrictions. So I think it's wonderful that you're out there, Pedro, and you're talking about all of this because, our world really needs it more than ever. And I think that this, idea of having all these families be more familiar by having them on television is so helpful to people because it is surprising sometimes how much people, you know, misunderstand. They look
Hmm.
on TikTok and they think that that's the world. So I'm very grateful to all that you're doing. So I really appreciate you being on today. Are there any important parts of your series or of your experience that you'd like to share that we haven't touched on yet?
No, there's just one final message that might be redundant, but when people say, "What do you want people to take out of the series?" What would you say to people that don't agree with your choices or with your lifestyle? I always say I really wish they could come to dinner in my house with my husband and my daughter. I want, and that goes for all of the families that are featured on the series. Like, a lot of people can look at single mothers by choice and say, this poor boy won't have a father figure. A lot of people can look at older parents and be like, this poor girl, her mother is going to be 70 when she is leaving high school or whatever. It's so easy to judge, but it's really hard to, you mentioned humanity, to connect with people that have different lives from you. Most people, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, no matter how conservative, no matter how religious, no matter how far right they are, when I say it's not political, it's really not. They would be shocked to come and see what nighttime routine is like in my house. It's just like nighttime routine in their house. We
Mhm.
give Isabel a bath, we feed her, we give her love, we read a couple of books, we pray she sleeps quickly. We have a martini after she goes to bed. We watch a
Mhm.
series and we go to bed. And if that sounds like a massive monstrosity, I think that says more about the person than about us. It's basically that.
Yes, of course. And, I think we've seen so far, right? We see what happened with Dick Cheney's family and other
Hmm.
families where they change their mind
True.
when somebody in their family
Hmm.
is queer or a single parent. And so hopefully by getting more and more of these messages out to people, it will become more familiar to them and we can move the needle in the right direction a little bit more.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So, where could people reach you, Pedro? Do you have like an Instagram handle or a website where people can?
Yes, they can watch the show on HBO Max. It's called Somewhat Familiar. And I would love to hear from everyone. I'm on Instagram. My profile is at Pedro Andrade TV. At Pedro Andrade TV. I love talking to people that follow me there. I love hearing about their opinions and their points of view when it comes to my work. So hit me up.
Okay, terrific, terrific. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody out there. I hope you take Pedro up on his offer because it's so important to stay connected and really make sure that you make time for what matters most, which is really being able to be your true self, have the family of your dreams, and live the life that you want. So, with that, Thank you again for coming, and please press subscribe and also make sure that you tune in. We have so much information in our community to share with you, and you can access it anytime from your phone or from your computer. We also have a free guide to making decisions about your family building journey. So you can always put a message Zoom in the comments because it's called the Zoom theory, and you will see that in a previous episode. So we have lots to show you today and going forward, and please continue to tune in so that we can continue to help you build the family of your dreams. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you'd like more personalized support, more information, and more education, you can find it in the show notes under the Building Your Family community. We'd love to see you inside. And if you were interested in today's topic, you will really like this video.